Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here today. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my story and what it is that I actually do. I am a coach for care partners or caregivers, whichever term you'd prefer to use. And also, I am a grief counselor for those on the grieving journey. I came to this practice because about 15 years ago, my wife, Belle, decided that she would like to go paddling. And I thought, wow, cool. She didn't usually really like to go paddling, but we went out onto a local pond and we took a ride on a beautiful spring day, paddling along and got out on a rock. And we got on the rock and she said to me, Cheryl, I have something to tell you. I have Alzheimer's. Well, part of me slid off that rock and to the bottom of the pond. And that part of me stayed there for a very, very long time. I I was desperate. I went onto the internet. I scoured the internet. I thought this can't be true. How can I make this not true? What can we do? There must be a trial. There must be a cure. There must be something. And I hadn't even realized that Belle had gone for a memory test. Well, I knew that there were some issues, but that's Belle. She takes it upon herself to find solutions. Uh, and one of the things that is true today is that she does not have Alzheimer's. It was a misdiagnosis. Belle has neurological illness, a dementia of sorts called Benson's syndrome, sometimes called postcortical atrophy. And she does need care, but she's fully functional and she is my absolute champion. So I ended up, there's a gap in the story, but I'll jump to going to coaching school. And when I finished the coaching school, I said to her, I love this, but who should I coach? And she said, Cheryl, you're a caregiver. So why don't you coach caregivers? And I began that journey in 2018, and I've never looked back. But one of the things that I do, and one of the things that I'm really interested in and has come to me over these past several years, is this topic of ambiguous grief on the caring journey, which is my topic for today. In the 70s, a well-known neuroscientist and psychotherapist named Pauline Boss coined the term ambiguous grief or ambiguous loss. And the way that she described it is that it is one of two things. There can be a physical absence with psychological presence. So that might be an example might be somebody that you love who has a terrible addiction and they have exited the family and they're nowhere to be found. For all we know, they could be living under a bridge, but they're psychologically present. We know that they're still alive, and that is one kind of ambiguous loss. The other kind of ambiguous loss that we'll be talking about right now is physical presence and psychological absence, which happens so much on the caring journey as we care for people who have dementia, who are having psychological deterioration. And it's very, very painful for care partners. And I've discovered over the years that almost no matter what a client is telling me, that underneath it is a profound sorrow and a deep sense of loss. So when we have ongoing loss, there's ongoing trauma. And the trauma, of course, creates confusion, pain, all kinds of stress. We all know how dangerous that is for the body over long term, and isolation, intense isolation. And the stress alone, as I mentioned, wears people out. One problem with ambiguous loss is that closure just is not possible. And in our culture, particularly, we want closure. We want a resolution, right? We don't like living with uncertainty. We want things, we want to know where we stand and let's get this done. Or if we can't get it done, at least let's know what's next, what's coming next. And on the caring journey, as you already know, we don't know that. So it's ambiguous loss or ambiguous grief is absolutely filled with uncertainty. And one of the problems that care partners have is that they don't have anyone to turn to very often, have anybody to turn to. They might say to friends or family, I'm really grieving. This is terrible. And to try to explain that to some people who are close to them, the response is, oh, well, come on now. You're so lucky that you still have them. Oh, yeah. Aren't we just so lucky? And yes, we are blessed to continue to have our loved ones. So I've talked to many clients. One story that I can tell you is that I know a client who said to me one time when her husband accused her of having an affair, she said, Cheryl, my soul is being chipped away. I'm just one chip at a time. And of course, when we're accused of having an affair, we're outraged. Like, how dare you? How could you say that after all the time that we've been together, after all the love that we've created in our relationship, and frankly, all that I've done for you, right? I have another client who has described to me that her husband thinks that he's poisoning, that she's poisoning him. I've seen you digging around in the closets. I see that white powder, and I see those men hanging around the house that you're dealing with. So, and again, we're just outraged, but underneath that outrage is this profound grief. Um, Sometimes it's really tiny things. We might make the favorite chicken dinner. Uh, it could be a chicken dinner that we know that our loved one has just enjoyed forever, and we make the dinner and we put it in front of them, and they're like, "I don't like that. I don't like chicken. I'm not eating that." And we feel rejected. And again, what's underneath that? Believe me, it's not the chicken dinner. It's ambiguous grief. Ambiguous grief is the loss of what was. And these little stories that I'm telling you, which you're probably very familiar with, can add up. And they add up and they add up. And day after day, they just cause us to feel so alone and so stressed out. And it's just very, very difficult to cope. I always remember the story of um, my own story. My wife Belle is such a champion for me, and she'll say to me, Cheryl, really, please, you have to have a life. Now, with post-cortical atrophy, it's really the senses are very much affected, so she cannot handle a lot of noise. It's actually painful. So she said to me one night a while back, why don't you go dancing? And so I went dancing with a friend, and I finished. I got there and I went in. It was at a bar in our local town, and I couldn't stay. And I said to my friend, I'm out of here. I'll see you later. And I walked out onto the street, and tears were streaming down my face. I couldn't even get in the car. I just walked the streets for a long time, looking in shop windows, because I knew that my wife and I would never be going dancing together again. So it's just really, really profound sorrow. Well, is there a remedy? What are we going to do about this? Well, in my work, I help other care partners find meaning in the present. And I think that that's probably the best that can be done, is to try to find meaning and reframe the situation, to try to focus on what do we have now? What can we enjoy now in our own lives and about the relationship that we currently have? And that relationship will change every day. So it's finding a way to be mindful and cope with the moving target, as sometimes it's referred to. So in these adjusting of perceptions, one of the things that I like to do is help people find more laughter. In my sessions with clients, and I work privately with clients and also in groups, but either way, we always find a way to laugh. And I'll encourage people, do something silly, because it is so healing. You know, when we say laughter is the best medicine, that's an old cliche, but there's a lot of truth in it. And one of the ways that we can find levity and laughter is through spontaneity. One of the things that I encourage, we create little action steps together with clients, and I'll say, what can you do this week? You know, can you do something spontaneous? Can you think outside the box? Maybe it is making a commitment to get in the car and crank up the radio and roll down the windows and sing at the top of your lungs with your hair blowing in the wind. And if somebody looks sideways at you and wonders what the heck you're all about, hey, I'm just singing at the top of my lungs, something that you would not normally do. One of the things that my wife has taught me about spontaneity was when she was an artist, and she would have paintings that either she didn't care for anymore or never did like, and she took them into town to the local grocery store, into the parking lot, and put them in the back of someone's pickup truck and drove away, so that she would gift her paintings and never knew what happened to them. I mean, who knows? And that doesn't matter. But to tell that story to clients always makes them giggle. And I'll say, find something in your house and go put it in the back of someone's pickup truck, and just get a good kick out of it. So these things can really help with our grief when we come into a levity, a state of levity, if that's possible, and it is possible. Another thing that is so important is finding community. Whether it's finding trusted friends, whether it's finding a caregiver support group, these things can really, really help us understand that we are not alone. And in terms of the isolation that I mentioned, how are we going to do it if it's not to find like-minded others to be with? So it's absolutely critical that we find people who will listen to us day or night on the phone without judgment. And the judgment part reminds me that occasionally, I mean, we have blood relatives and they're very helpful, but sometimes they're not, or they can be way far away, or sometimes they're very nearby and have a real idea about how you should be doing the caring and what you should do differently. And it doesn't feel very supportive. So Pauline Boss, who talks about ambiguous grief, says this is the big reason to create what she terms psychological family. Goes a long way toward our mitigation of ambiguous grief. One of the things that I also like to talk about to clients is to forgive ourselves. We make mistakes day in and day out. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard care partners say, I feel so guilty. I feel so guilty. I'm not doing this correctly, or I made a mistake, or I lashed out at the person that I love, or in secret, they tell me, I don't think I can keep doing this. When will this be over? And then feel guilty for that. there's so much guilt on the caring journey that I actually created a course a couple of years ago called Overcoming Caregiver Guilt. And it really is all about coming into our bodies and finding mindfulness techniques and finding community and all of these things that I'm talking about. Meditation, and I always do guided meditations and teach my clients breathing techniques so that the nervous system can be calmed. And only then can we begin to feel less guilty. One of the things that I've realized is that we can't really begin to care for ourselves until we develop a true compassion for the people that we are. Because when we don't feel worthy, we can't put ourselves first. How many times have we heard how to do self-care? Are you drinking enough water? Are you eating properly? Are you watching how much alcohol you're drinking daily? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting outside to exercise? Are you getting into nature? Well, on and on and on. The list goes on. But if we don't truly, truly care for ourselves, we can't rise to the top and even consider that list. So I can't take the journey away from anyone, nor should I even think that I could try. But through deep listening, I think that alone can be very healing. So please find somebody who can truly, deeply listen to you. We all need to be heard. And as a matter of fact, the person that we're caring for, they also need to be heard. They also have their own ambiguous grief and their own sense of ambiguity. They don't know what is coming next for them. And they have a lot of confusion and sometimes some agitation. And it's very important that we be able to lift them up and help them feel grounded and help them understand that they have a reason to be here, that they still are a valuable human being on this planet. And of course, we can't do that until we can do that for ourselves. And that's the reason for developing a true sense of care and compassion for ourselves. So helping with ambiguous grief is one of the things that I do for care partners. I also help with regular grief in grief groups after loved ones have passed. I do this in groups. I do it privately, and I'm so grateful that you showed up and listened to me today. Thank you so much. And if I can ever be of help, I'm right here. Take good care.